بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم أكرمني بنور الفهم وخرجني من الظلمات الوهم أفتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن معرفتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So there are different types of knowledge. One is the knowledge of the heart, which is intuitive, direct, immediate, and the other is knowledge of head, which is slow, takes time to think, logical, so both of them are necessary. See, the Sufi have the knowledge of the heart and the ulama have the knowledge of the head, and either side alone is insufficient. The head itself is not sufficient and the heart by itself also is not sufficient, so you need to have both. Now, so what we are trying to do, if you don't have the heart involved, then you can be completely misled, and this is what has happened in economics. At first they cut out your heart, then they say that okay, they feed you any kind of garbage you like, and the mind is very weak, so it can accept anything because the logical power of human beings is not so strong. So the theory of value, how much things are worth, what is the price, this has been a topic of major battle and major debate throughout the centuries. In particular, what is the value of labor? That is the wage equals marginal product. This is a topic which has been extremely controversial. But today all of this controversy is buried, suppressed. It's not even mentioned in the books because it's a very dangerous topic. I mean, if they had actually said, okay, there is progress in knowledge, this is what we used to believe, but now we have learned better, then you could have understood that, okay. But no, they buried it under the carpet because actually the older theories are better than the modern theories. As I've explained in many lectures, that the modern theory is completely wrong. So now what we are going to do is we are going to go back and look at the older theories which were suppressed. So Adam Smith and Ricardo, they both believed in the labor theory of value. When you have anything that is produced, the value of that thing is the amount of labor that went into that. Karl Marx also. All three of them are agreed that labor is the main contributor of value. This demand and supply concept, this is a new concept and is not a correct concept. So once you understand that the value is produced by labor, then technically then it's moral and just that the labor should get the value, but as it happens in capitalist society, some portion of that value goes to the capitalist. So that is called exploitation. So the total value of product is divided into two parts. One part is called wages and the other part is called profits. The profits is what the capitalist gets and it is what the laborer loses. Now exactly the idea that laborers get marginal product of labor, this is saying that laborers get what they deserve. So there is no, and the capitalists, they get the marginal product of capital, so they get what they deserve. So everybody gets what they deserve and there is no exploitation. So this is the underlying argument which is never mentioned. That is the thing that is driving all of this. So there is a hidden battle taking place, a battle over justice, what is moral, what is fair. But we are not allowed to use the name of morality, of justice. So you cannot talk about it. But this is the person, John Bates Clark, who started this theory of marginal product of labor, and this is what he said. The distribution of income is controlled by a natural law, and this law gives every agent the amount of wealth which that agent creates. So if the capitalist creates wealth, he gets it, and if the laborer creates wealth, he gets it. And so there is no exploitation. This is the start of the battle. And actually, I mean, this is explicitly against Marxist theory, which says that no, capitalists get more than what they deserve, and the laborers get less than what they deserve. So, after 1900, in 1920s, I think, some economists in Cambridge, England, Joan Robinson and some others, they wanted to dispute this idea of the marginal product of labor. So they said that you cannot aggregate the capital. So there is no capital. You say that, okay, there's a aggregate production function, and then you say, okay, the marginal product of labor is the first derivative of that. So they say that there is no aggregate capital. How can you aggregate lasers and trucks and many other kinds of machines? So the answer is that by value you calculate the prices, but the prices are the market prices. Now the market prices is exactly what you are saying you are trying to justify. What is the market price? You are saying that my labor gets its marginal product. Now how do you define the marginal product? Well, you take the price of capital and the price of labor as given, and then it's on the basis of these prices that you get products, and these prices are used to aggregate the different things. That is, if you have lasers, they are produced by a process, and this process, you are saying, satisfies the condition. So it's a circular argument. You use the prices in existence to justify the creation of an aggregate quantity of capital, and then you use that to justify the prices. So it's a circular calculation. People who went in the details of this calculation, they said that if you change some things here and there, the price of different types of capital changes, and so the value of capital changes. So this argument doesn't make any sense, and ultimately the Cambridge capital controversy was won by the England Cambridge, that is Joan Robinson, and Solow and Samuelson conceded defeat that yes, capital cannot be aggregated. But although the theoretical debate went that way, the practical debate was to Samuelson and Solow. They continued to use aggregate capital, and nobody even mentions that there is a problem with using aggregated capital, even though those people who said it, and there was some defense by Solow that it is a parable, it is just like a story that we are telling. It's obviously not literally true. So this is the standard methodology to defend these silly concepts. So basically, modern economics hides all of the issues that were discussed by the early political economists. The early political economists were asking about how much do the laborers get, how much do the capitalists get, and the parasites. There are people in the economy who earn money without doing any work, and this activity is harmful to the economy, because basically those who produce should get the money. Recently there has been a book about the same concept called takers versus makers, and it says that there are some people who just try to take money and some people who try to make things. So basically, I think the author, she has said that today we are teaching in our MBA programs everybody to be a taker. Somehow make money, don't worry about contributing anything to the economy, and that's a good way to destroy the economy. Now, in the late 19th century, around 1890s or so, Henry George wrote this book called Poverty and Progress or something like that. And in it he showed that basically the rent of the land, land is a natural resource. It doesn't really belong to anybody. I mean, I can put a name on it and say this is mine, but it's like if I say that, okay, such and such star belongs to me. Well, yes, okay, we can write down in the books that this belongs to me, but yes, I have nothing to do with. Similarly, nobody ever created the land. Nobody. It's just a legal fiction that somebody owns the land. So he said that land ownership is the biggest marker of wealth at that time. The rich people are the landowners, and since the rent that you collect from land is not due to any productive activity on your part, then we should tax that, because that is the most efficient tax. Because there's nothing, if you tax any productive activity, as we do these days, then the incentive are damaged. Somebody who's doing productive activity and he's not getting the full return of it, then he may not be able to do that. So taxation on productive activity is inefficient. So he proposed a single tax which would be placed only on land, and you can extend it to unproductive activities. And this book was enormously popular. It sold hundreds of thousands. It was the most popular book written in English language. It was hundreds of thousands of copies were sold, and many people started to believe in it and to utilize this theory and to agitate for change politically. And they wanted to implement this one tax, which could have been very useful for the economy. So actually, new classical economic theory was invented to counteract Henry George. When you come to classical political economy, which was basically buried at the beginning of the 20th century, and nobody knows what it is anymore. The major writers in England were saying that the dominant class of rent takers are just idlers, they do nothing. And the aristocracy in England was exactly that, and in fact they prided themselves on not doing any work. And this man, I think, I don't remember where I got this quote from, labor is not respected, and being showing everybody that I do nothing was actually the thing which was admired, and saving was not considered a good thing, and flaunting your wealth was considered a mark of a gentleman and an aristocrat. So the thing is that at that time the political economists were able to say that these people do nothing, because the wealthy people didn't object to this. They agreed with this and they liked it. But nowadays, see, the financiers, they do nothing and they extract a huge amount of money, and they call their process, see, by just purchasing a lot of stock you can drive the price up. And it was clearly recognized by the early economists, even in the early 20th century, that this is a harmful activity for the economy. This is called speculation and gambling, and it should be prevented. Now, when the financial class got power, they changed the name. They said, this is not speculation, this is wealth creation. You take some stocks and you push up their prices, you have suddenly increased the wealth of the economy. It's completely ridiculous, but that is the current terminology. And so when the financiers talk, then the language changes, and things which were known as harmful and are now known as beneficial. So this is what one of the articles we discussed last time, power knowledge, that the theories which everybody believes are not believed because they are true, but because they are aligned with the interests of the powerful. One more thing, so that's one thing, but the second thing, which is even more important, is that theory is the power. That is, once we believe these theories, then we will actually become a part of the instruments of power. We will go around and say that yes, Pakistan should drop all its duties and let the foreign goods come in and collapse our industries because this is efficient. and we should let the supply and demand operate in equilibrium and let those students who cannot pay for the houses just go back because that is efficient. We don't realize that the market allows that every homeowner can make his cost, every student can find a house. So that should be considered efficient. No, that's not considered efficient because it's not the market equilibrium. So these theories, they change what is an injustice into justice. That is how theories operate. Theories make zulm look like justice, and they make justice look like zulm. So there is this novel by George Orwell called 1984. These days it's very highly popular, and it has many interesting things, but one of the very important ideas of George Orwell is that he says that in order for the state to control the minds of the people, they changed the language, and they invented this language called Newspeak. And in Newspeak there are many rules, but basically the language is designed to make it impossible to say certain things. So for example, nowadays when we use the word terrorism, it means Muslims who are killing a few people in a crowd. If one nation bombs a whole nation to death, Iraq is completely destroyed, 1 million civilians die, 40 million made homeless and sick and poor, there is no name for this. This is not called terrorism, and this is done systematically. So we cannot even think that destruction of Libya, Syria, Iraq, and many others in Latin America we don't even know about. But there is no name for this phenomena. We can't even talk about it, how capitalism is destroying countries. So the words that we use, the language that we use is dominated by is dictated by the power, and this makes it impossible to think certain thoughts. So some of the key concepts of political economy. Today we will talk about what Adam Smith actually said, and we will see. So one of the key concepts is that there is unearned income. So there is parasites. There are people who take from the product of the economy, but they don't contribute anything. So these are harmful to the economy. Land is a collective resource. It belongs to everybody. You can have it temporarily if you use it productively. The idea that somebody can remotely own land, actually even in Islam, this was prohibited. Hazrat Umar Razillah Ta'ala gave a land to somebody, and for 3 years he did not use it. So Umar, take it back, that you can't. So basically the idea is that land should belong to you if you can use it. There is this remote landlordship. This is somehow not quite compatible with ideas of Islam. I mean, if you can use the land to produce something, that's very good. That's what entitles you to the ownership. If you just own the land, that's not, and somebody else does all the work, that's not necessarily. There were George's concepts were used effectively in some states and with great benefit, but all of this history was wiped out. Again, one of the George Orwell concepts, the hero of the story, or not the hero, anti-hero actually. He works in the office of records, and his job is to change history. So he looks at all the records of all the things in the past, and anything that is happened in the past which is against the official line is removed and erased, and then it is replaced by something which is correct. So today also, all of the bad things that were done by Muslims, they are available in the books, but all of the magnificent achievements, they have been erased. If you look at, I looked at Newton and all of the Copernicus, and you find that yes, Newton says himself that I have been able to do my work because I stand on the shoulder of giants. There was a lot of previous work, but what is mentioned? Just the Europeans and then the Greeks, and no mention of the Muslims. Schumpeter, famous historian of economics, he says that first the Greeks had thoughts, and then for many centuries humankind didn't have any thoughts about economics. Then suddenly again in Europe they started thinking about economics. So the erasure of history. So the ideas of Henry George were very dangerous, very damaging. But today nobody knows about Henry George because he has been disappeared from the history. It was a major revolutionary. So John Bates Clark, what he did was an amazing trick. Up to 19th century, when you talked about production, there were two classes. There was the landlords who had land, and there was the agricultural production, and then there was industrial production, and these two were clearly different in many different ways. What John Bates Clark did was amazing. He said that he disappeared the land. He said the land and machine are the same thing. And so now you are studying FKL. K, capital includes both land and machines. These two are entirely different, and they have entirely different functions. The ownership of land is just by a conceptual thing. It's legal fiction. It can be changed. It has no effect. But machine is different. Now you manufacture a machine. Machine is a special purpose thing which is used in the production of other things. It is useless by itself, and it is acquired by. It is produced. It can be destroyed, and somebody produces it with hard work. Land is not produced. So these two things are not the same. They have many different effects in the economy. But what he argued that no land, and he had to make an argument that how do we make land valuable? Well, just like he says that by exclusion, by preventing people from entering it, you make the land valuable. So these ridiculous arguments were made and accepted and ultimately successful. So the Newspeak, in the new language, you have been trained as economists and you don't know that there is a land and there is a machine, and these two are different concepts and they have different economic functions. A machine is produced, so it has some cost of production. Land is not produced, it has no cost of production. And this cost of production is very important. If you can produce certain types of machine cheaply, then certain types of production processes can take place. If the cost of machine is high, it has different implications. So from then on, economic world, instead of having labor, land and capital, you just have two elements, labor and capital. So now capital in the previous theory was not free. You had to accumulate. You have to save money in order to buy capital, investment and capital. So basically, if you want to industrialize, you have to have savings. But when land is included in the picture as capital, then land is there. It's not part of savings. So there is a. So Tobin said that when you equate land and capital, then a lot of issues of classical economics just disappear. So this equation of land equals machinery is just put blinders on the eyes of economists, which they wear to this day. Yeah, the book was called Progress of Property, Progress and Poverty, published in 1879, Henry George. Sold millions of copies worldwide. Had influence on thought of a lot of people. I mean, nearly all major leaders in communist leaders and Labour Party in England and all were influenced by this book, and it was a big threat to the wealthy people. So they fought back. Clark was the first one to formulate ideas which could be used to attack Henry George. And one of them was to merge the land with the machinery. That way the special feature of land which George was giving to it, that land is non-productive, it's a social, disappears. Land is just like a machine. So a machine, everybody understands that if I produce a machine, I own it, I should get, it is justified for me to rent it out for services or to sell it, and its services are actually productive. So this idea. So he was recruited by Columbia in 1895. Who was the funder of Columbia was J.P. Morgan, one of the multimillionaires, and they were looking for people who could carry out this battle, and many people asked to appoint him. There was a fight over. At that time in the universities, you had in the USA there was no tenure system. So, and in fact tenure system was developed as a response to this thing which kept happening. So anybody who promoted the ideas of Henry George, they were fired, because who was funding the universities? The wealthy people. And those people who were supporting the capital and the Henry Clark theories, they were promoted. So somebody wrote that today the famous saying among academia is publish or perish. So you have to publish a lot of articles or you get out of the economy. But at that time it was placate or perish. You had to make the boss happy or you would be fired. And so many people, many important people, famous people were fired from universities for thoughts which were supposed to be anti-wealth, basically. Anything that was anti-wealth is fired. So from Wharton School, Scott Nearing was fired because he said that rich people are parasites. Now, one of the things that was helpful in this regard was Hegel's German philosopher, Hegel, who said the following thing, that morality is a social convention. Morality in Pakistan is different from India and different from China and so on. So what morality is agreement among the people. And this agreement is enforced by the state. So if somebody violates the moral law, then the state will punish him. It's a crime or whatever, however. So basically, the state creates the morality. So the state itself is above morality. No moral rules apply to the state. So that's why when the Germans did some massively wrong things and people complained, said, no, we are above morality. We can do whatever we like. The moral rules don't apply to us. So Clark said that the state may say what pure capital is, and it may say what land is. It has decided that these two things are the same, and that is it. That's the end. That's the last word. So Dewey in 1987 says capital theory in the Clark tradition, which means combining labor and land, has provided the basis for virtually all empirical work on wealth and income. So today, when we talk about wealth, we don't have this distinction. So basically we are blind to the forces which are driving wealth. A concept which was specially tailored to lead arguments for use against George is the basis for all empirical work on income and wealth today. So land and rent concepts are not available. Today, this is just one instance. There are many, many things which students are often quite confused with, and they are just given some dumb arguments to make them, to pacify them. See, when you say rent, rent is paid on land. It is rent is not interest is paid on loans which are taken to finance. Then you have returns on the production, a productive activity. So when the firm works, it creates product, it sells this product, there is some risk, and then these are the returns. Now, profits are risky. Now, according to the theory that you have learned, there is no difference between the earnings of the firm, which is the returns on capital. You see, these are two things which are being confused. There is returns on capital. I own some machinery, industry, and I use it in business, and I get returns on it. This is return on capital. Now, so the bank, it owns money, and it loans money to the bank, and it gets return on it. That's interest. Now, according economic theory makes no difference between these two. The money that is lent to the investor and the return that the banks make on it, that's also return to capital. And the capital that is machinery and it is used and it makes product, that's also return to capital. And these two concepts are confused even though they are completely different. And according to economic theory, the two are the same because returns to capital will equalize in equilibrium. Again, this equilibrium concept is another trap because once you start thinking about the process, you will find out the games that have been played. But so you don't think about the process, you only think about the end result. And end result is also obtained purely in the mind, not actually doing it. Actually, the game that I have for you, that I want you to play, will give you some experience with what happens in real markets in a very simple, because this is something you don't have experience with. So I can't rely on one part. So I need you to play this simple game so that you have the experience, so that you can have the intuition that is needed to understand what really happens in markets as opposed to what is told in these silly books. So all of these things, the rent, the interest, now the corporation, when it acquires financing, it takes two types of loans. It takes loans from banks at fixed interest. It also issues bonds in which it is forced to pay some interest to the bondholder. It also issues stocks as a means of raising funds. And in the stocks are the halal part. This is the part when you pay the stock owner from out of what you earn. So, according to the Modigliani-Miller theorem, whether you use bonds or stocks, the result is the same. They are equivalent, even though this is completely false. So basically, a lot of different concepts which have different meaning and implication, they all become one, and so it's impossible to think clearly. This is George Orwell, Newspeak. Economics is basically Newspeak. So now what happens, why can't you talk about one major issue? You see, all of Karl Marx is about the accumulation of capital. Capital is not there in the first place. You slowly start accumulating, and as capital increases, your productivity increases. So land is not like that. So it makes no sense. How can you combine land and labor? So what do? He said, okay, let's study equilibrium. The end of the process. Now the problem is that there is no equilibrium because you have a continuous increase. So you just close your eyes, ostrich. So you have a static state, you have equilibrium, there is some amount of... Now once you have equilibrium, then you can possibly combine the amount of capital. Now if there is a fixed amount of capital and it has always been there, it will always be there, it was never created, it was never accumulated, then it is like land. It is much more like land than if you have a process going on, there's investment, capital is increasing, it's depreciating, all of this is dynamic process. then of course capital cannot be kept the same. So that's why equilibrium is a very important concept. Again, this is part of Orwellian Newspeak. You see, Varian starts out and he says that, look, there are two principles you cannot question. One is optimization and one is equilibrium. Everything else will be subordinate to this. We can't talk about how you get to equilibrium, what happens if there are multiple equilibria. All of these things are under the carpet because the students cannot be allowed to think. So, ever since Clark introduced this magnificent trick, microeconomics, there is no time in it. Things don't happen. There's no past, there's no future. Everything is in suspended animation. There's no time, there's no sequence in microeconomic theory. So, how can you brainwash an entire nation? Some people must retain their brains. Well, as I said, the universities were captured by the big finance. Then scholarships were given. 7 billion was given to the soldiers from the World War I. Large number of people were trained in these economics. Huge numbers of people. So this brainwashing, Skitovsky, famous economist, he said, from every point of view, land may be regarded as a capital good, and rent of land is similar in every respect to the gross earnings of a produced factor. Complete nonsense. This is being taught. This was taught to all of the nation. So Clark's theories dominated the economics profession. They first took over the minds, and now the university educated people, they become the leaders of the nation. So eventually, first in the halls where the young minds are molded, and then in the legislatures where these molded minds act on the public policy. This is how you brainwash an entire nation. And this is what's being done to all of you. You will be taking over. I mean, you're not MPhil from PIDE or PhD from PIDE is not something simple. You will be getting good government jobs, and you will be advising people and making policies all on the basis of blind. So, part of the process of rewriting the past, this is the job that is done by the hero in George Orwell. He rewrites the past. So, part of this was to just take Adam Smith and tell about him things which he did not say. So, for example, it is said in nearly all textbooks, you can find it in Manikiv and in many other books, that Adam Smith's major contribution to economics was the invisible hand. It's completely untrue. Invisible hand occurs in a small place, in a footnote, in 2 or 3 minor places, and it's used in a way very different from what modern economists use it for. So, Adam Smith did not invent the invisible hand. It was invented later, and it was foisted onto Adam Smith, that this is what Adam Smith, to give it respectability, that this is an old idea. It wasn't. And all of the important ideas of Adam Smith have been hidden. Oh, those were things he said, but those are obsolete. So the important things we have taken. So nobody reads Adam Smith anymore. Now, just in the note in the passing, David Graeber, in his book Debt, the First 5,000 Years, has written that the Western tradition of free market and commerce outside of government intervention described by Adam Smith repeats almost verbatim, yani word for word, the words of Islamic Persian scholars like Nasiruddin Tusi, Ghazali, and Smith had Latin translations of their works in his library. So I don't know what he took, what he didn't take. It's a job for historians. But the basic point is that Adam Smith is the father of economics, and there was no thinking by Muslims about economic ideas. That was done. Hamid Hosseini has written a book, has written an article on Adam Smith's and what he borrowed, and there's been a lot of work. I haven't on getting to the roots of what was said by the Muslims and what was taken by Adam Smith. I don't know. So I'm just going to use Adam Smith, but the original, I don't know who said what. Doesn't matter very much, except for the fact that the acknowledgement is missing. If the acknowledgement was there, there's no problem. We understand that knowledge is a joint production of all of mankind. Everybody gets to participate. But to exclude Muslims from the line is just injustice. Now, one very important thing that is no longer available because the supply and demand has buried them is that a lot of things, a lot of prices actually depend on the technological aspects of how things are produced. So basically the correct understanding of price is that price is a markup over costs. So basically it's not marginal cost. Very often it's not demand driven, because when production takes place, normally it takes place under conditions of constant cost. So you can produce as much as you like depending on the demand. So the price is determined by the cost, not by the demand. Anyway, that is the point of view of the old classical economists, and this has been forgotten since the advent of the marginal method. So now we are going to try to remember some things which have been forgotten. दिल धड़कने का सबब याद आया, वो तेरी याद थी अब याद आया. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. So Adam Smith starts by saying that the true wealth of nation lies in per capita real income. This is a very damaging concept, because actually when you reduce to per capita, then you lose the income distribution. But Adam Smith was separately aware of so he was talking about the length of a nation as a whole, and he said that it depends on two things: the productivity of the labor and how much labor is used in productive employment and how much is unproductive employment. Now, so basically one thing that is clearly understood here is labor is produced, wealth is produced by the laborers. It's not produced by the financiers, not produced by banks, not produced by landlords. So this is very important, and this is clear, and this is something which no economics books mentions, and this is the how Adam Smith starts. Once we understand this, then it becomes clear that we need to support our laborers. Today, all we are talking about, how to develop Pakistan is how to bring in more industry, how to get technology, how to get FDI. But the wealth producers are our people. The first thing you need to do is to make sure that everybody can eat. After that, you bring in the industries so that the people have jobs. It's not that the industries are the source of growth. All of this has been forgotten. With the yaad thi. So this is where Adam Smith starts. Now, the value theory. This is the most important thing. The price of a commodity. Adam Smith writes that the price is broken up into three parts. And so he talks about two kinds of societies. One is primitive society, where the production is very simple, basically laborers produce. And then there is complicated society where you have capitalists and landlords, and they are extracting some rent. So, but there are three parts, and basically it's rents, profits, and labor. These are the three parts. So now there were several kinds of value that were used by classical economists. All of them have been disappeared. So there was the exchange value. So, for example, water. What is it worth if I sell it? It's worth very little. And there is use value. That is very high. If I need water, the use value of water is very high. As opposed to this diamonds, the exchange value is very high, the use value is very low. So there was this famous diamond water paradox, that how do we understand what determines the exchange value and what is its relationship to the use value. So what Adam Smith has to say, he says that the exchange value is, here we are just talking about how to measure. It's not about what determines exchange value. He says how to measure. Well, simple measure is the price. If I sell a diamond for $1,000, then the value is $1,000. But he says that the nominal, this is the nominal price, the apparent price. He says that this is not a good measure because it's not invariant across time. The money itself changes in value. So he wants to find something which is more solid, which will remain the same across time. And he says that in a static economy, if you have the equilibrium of variance, then these two things are the same. There is no difference. It's in a dynamic, what happens when time processes take place, then the value of money can change. But the amount of labor that is used to produce something, he thinks, is more invariant across time. So that's why he wants to use the labor concept rather than the money concept. So he says that as a measure of quantity, something which itself varies is not an accurate measure of value of other things. And if you have a ruler, and the ruler itself is rubbered and it stretches, then it is not a good measure. This is actually a concept directly taken from Al-Ghazali, who said the same thing. And he said that that's why interest is haram, because interest forces, money is used to measure things and the value of things. So if you have interest, then the value of it forces a change in the value of money. If I have 100 rupees today, it's worth 110 tomorrow. Then the thing which I am using to measure the value of all things, that itself changes. That's actually going to cause damage to the system, and that is exactly what and that's exactly what we mean. The money should be such that the prices are stable. It's very important for an economic system to have stable prices. And so one of the requirements for that is that the value of money should not be changing. One of the requirements for that is that there should be no interest in the economy. So anyway, this argument, which is which is found in Adam Smith, is directly taken from Al-Ghazali. So he says that instead of using money, let's use labor. So he says that originally, when you produce things, you do it by working. It's not, money doesn't exist in the original simple economy. So the correct measure of value is the amount of labor. So he argues, this is original passages from Adam Smith, that if something is hard to make, it requires a lot of labor to produce, it will be expensive. If something is easy to make with cheap labor, it will be cheap. It's a natural phenomenon. So the real price is the amount of labor, money is the apparent price or the nominal price.
What about the efficiency of labor?
Yeah, this is true. He mentions this, that efficiency, whereas he thinks that is he says specifically that's a second order consideration. If efficiency of labor increases rapidly, that will be, he says that's not normally the case and not the majority of goods. But so he considers that, but he ignores that. Now, Adam Smith is supposed to be the first free market economist, but he says that basically we should have the laborers are the ones who create value, and we should take care of them. They should be well fed, clothed, and housed. So now he considers two types of societies. The first is the primitive society where there is no money. He says, okay, if you have a nation of hunters and beavers are plentiful, easy to catch, and deer is harder to catch. Oh, it's the opposite here. So then the one beaver will exchange for 2 deers. What is usually the produce of 2 days' labor will be worth double of what is the produce of 1 day's labor. So basically that's the labor theory of value. Okay, so that's the value. The value is the amount of labor that is embodied. Now the real value of the total produce gets divided into 3 parts. One part gets to landlord as rent, one part goes to the capitalist as profit, and some part goes to the laborer as wages. Thus the real price must be broken up into rent, profit, and wages. So that a central issues for Adam Smith is that what is the share of products that the landlords are getting. This part is rent, which is unproductive income. Now capitalist situation is a little bit different. They get profits, but they are also putting in capital. Again, there are 2 types of capital here. There is financial capital, which is not productive, and there is machinery, which is productive. So these 2 have to be differentiated. Again, in your economic theory, you don't differentiate the 2 because of the Clark trick. We should call it the Clark trick. Clark says that financial capital, machinery, land, it's all one thing, just capital. So basically, how much do people get, whether or not it's justified? These are the big topics of classical economy, not neoclassical. This is the difference between classical economics, which is political economy. That's why it's political economy, because basically what we will see is that the laborers get a bad deal because they don't have power. The landlords and the capitalists get a good deal. They get to make money even though they don't contribute as much. So they automatically you get a theory of income distribution by class. How much, what is in the total national income, how much are the capitalists getting, how much are the laborers getting, how much are the landlords getting. And basically Adam Smith, Ricardo, Marx, they are all talking about this distribution. And today it has been buried. There's no mention of how much the bankers make, how much the agriculturists make. And this is very crucial. If you want to understand Pakistani economy, we need to know what the agriculturists are making, what the industrialists are making, what the bankers are making, what the laborers are making, what the professors are making. All of this is part of the economy, and unless we break up the economy into these parts, we can't understand how it works. Now, in economics, labor is labor, whether you're the professor or whether you're the landlord, it's all labor. Alright, I think I'm going to end this lecture here.